Another difference from today was the canned and stored foods. Instead of today's grocery store, tin canned products, fresh garden vegetables were canned in glass jars. Pearl was an expert gardener and a master at canning. Here we see a rare old photo of Pearl's pride and joy, her can house.
March 16, 1936. Beautiful day, and at last I've gotten my garden started. Planted peas, onions, white beans, radishes, lettuce, carrots, beets, and potatoes. Also worked some in the yard.
As the 1930s were passing by, yet another storm was brewing for the Todd family. This time it would be a literal storm of biblical proportion. By 1940, the eldest Todd child, Nina, was 15 years old. From every account, she was one of the sweetest, considerate, and beautiful girls to be found. Being the eldest, Nina helped her mother raise her younger brothers and sisters. She was always willing to help with household chores and with the store business. Nina loved music and was blessed with a beautiful voice. She was also an accomplished musician. She composed the music to a poem which was used in one of the early Stamps Baxter songbooks. Even as a teenager, she was becoming very much in demand as a singer at church services, homecomings, and revivals. It has been said by many that her lovely face radiated the very love of God when she sang. Amidst an angry brewing storm, Nina accepted an invitation to sing at a church revival in nearby Stony Fork on August 12, 1940. This was to be her last performance. She had planned to spend a few nights during this time with her cousin, Mrs. Worth Green. It had been raining constantly for over a week. The creeks in the area were rising to a level few residents had seen before. In spite of the horrible weather, Nina performed beautifully on that fateful night. Outside the little church, the downpour showed no signs of diminishing, and many people began to feel uneasy. By the next day, the wind began to blow violently, lightning flashed, and the rain began to pour in solid sheets of water. Keep in mind, this was a time long before folks received warnings from news networks or the Weather Channel of impending hurricanes or tornadoes. Just prior to the revival service on August 13th, 1940, Nina accompanied Mr. and Mrs. Worth Green to the neighboring home of Zeb Green. During their visit, the rain increased in fury and intensity to the point they were unable to leave Zeb's home. It quickly became obvious there would be no revival service on this fateful night. With the hillsides and steep mountain slopes already saturated with rain, the situation was becoming extremely serious. The downpour of rain slamming onto the tin roof of Zeb's home was becoming almost deafening. Nina, Worth, and Zeb decided to go out onto the front porch of Zeb's home to witness the worst storm either of them had ever encountered. Unfortunately, this was to be a fatal mistake. Above Zeb's home was U.S. Highway 421. During those days, highway drainage capabilities were not built to withstand unusually huge amounts of torrential downpours. The highway gave way in a landslide of mud, rocks, and trees. In the darkness on the porch, the three began to feel a rumbling. All of a sudden, the huge landslide crashed into Zeb's home. Nina and Zeb were trying desperately to grab anything they could. Worth was struggling to hold on and reaching for Nina. Unfortunately, he was unsuccessful. Zeb and Nina were violently swept away, while Worth was barely able to save himself by getting back inside before the entire porch perished. One can only imagine how helpless Worth felt when his wife asked, "Where's Nina and Zeb?" Zeb's brother Elster lived nearby and actually heard the screams of his brother and Nina from his front porch. He made a brave but unsuccessful attempt to cross the raging waters to save them. Meanwhile, the floodwaters were rising dangerously close to the Todd household in Buffalo Cove. John Carl decided to move his family across the road to Buffalo Church. Today we take for granted that almost anyone we know is only a cell phone call away. This was certainly not the case in rural 1940 America. There were no telephones of any kind in this area, and the night spent inside Buffalo Cove Church must have been long and suspenseful for the Todd family as they prayed that Nina would be all right. Several days passed before the family received the tragic news of Nina's demise. During the chaotic aftermath of what has now been deemed the 40 flood, search and rescue teams were dispatched to look for victims. With each passing day, the hope that Nina would be found alive waned. One of the lifelong residents of Buffalo Cove is Maynard Robbins, a World War II veteran. He recalls traveling to Stony Fork to help search for Nina.
Well, Nina, to tell you the truth, was one of my best girlfriends. When she got drowned, she was up on Stony Fork. She went to Stony Fork, and the house is still standing up there. And she went up there for, they was running a revival up there, and that's when she got drowned. Okay, we got a bunch together here, all teenagers, me and all my brothers, Rodney Miller, Dennis Coffey, Clarence Cotter, all of us got together. And we went over here and went up Stony Fork. We got in right over here in Stony Fork and went all the way up to where your grandma's sister, Worth Green's wife. Okay, we went all the way up there and searched the rocks and logs and everything, and they was hogs, they was pigs, they was dogs. In other words, you talk about a stinking mess.
After days of unsuccessfully poring over the carnage left by the flood, Maynard and the others sadly returned to Buffalo Cove. About 2 weeks later, a young boy saw a hand and a part of an arm emerging from a sand pile. it was Nina. Not far from this spot, Zeb's body was also found. They had washed some 20 miles in the horrible current of the flood.